Let me be clear. I have enormous respect for every person you just heard from. The State Department, though, is warning Americans not to go, not just based on the dangers to themselves, but potentially to any U.S. efforts to try to end the war. But that hasn't stopped some members of Congress from seemingly encouraging vets to join the fight.
I think that what they see and what people around the world are seeing is democracy's at stake. And as President Zelensky said to us, this is not just a fight for Ukrainian people. This is a fight for all of us.
Ukrainian President Zelensky created a foreign military legion days after Russia invaded. That includes a number of Americans. But let's say one of these American fighters is captured by Russian troops and held as a hostage. What happens then? In its briefing Friday, the State Department warned that Russia will treat foreign troops captured in Ukraine not as lawful combatants, but as violent criminal mercenaries, meaning any American fighters taken by Moscow could be subject to mistreatment while in Russian custody. Some of these folks don't even have military training, and Ukraine isn't promising to train the ones that don't. Now, when the U.S. military goes to war, there's a whole bureaucracy that goes with it. There are people there to handle logistics for just about every scenario imaginable. Everyone knows what role they're playing and their procedures in place if a soldier is captured by the enemy. But look, there's a choice the individuals have to make. I am equally concerned about the potential impact it would have on the greater war effort. If Putin is able to parade a captured American in front of TV cameras, it would be a huge boon to his effort to legitimize the war to Russians and to claim that the U.S. has been fighting them all along, and while also being potentially disastrous for America's diplomatic push to end the war. These stories make for great headlines and attention-grabbing sound bites, and it is noble. But it is also really dangerous, and I think that the media should be taking more care in how they tell these stories, and not just to amplify the stories of heroism of people going abroad. Joining me now to weigh in is Bruen, former Director of Global Engagement under President Obama and a former U.S. diplomat. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. All right, so what do you make of this first from a sort of media perspective, the way that a lot of these folks are being portrayed?
Well, look, Dan, I think you've got to put it in context. One, the very real risks. We've seen how reckless Russia has been in their bombardment, not only of the Ukrainian military, but of civilian targets. Obviously, just in the last couple days, we've seen journalists who have been injured and even killed. So it is really important that when we talk about engaging in Ukraine, whether it's in a military capacity, a humanitarian capacity, we are also quite clear about the risks that that involves.
Right, but I'm asking you now from a media perspective, in terms of the way that the media has been portraying these individuals. And again, I want to be really careful here because I do have enormous respect for these people. I am not suggesting that somehow they're to blame, but I would think that there could be an enormous price to pay for the United States if one of them is captured by the Russians.
No, without question, the Russians would hold this up, not just for propaganda purposes, but it would provide them additional leverage to try and extract concessions both from Kiev as well as from the United States. And, when I was an American diplomat, we were told from day one, you do everything you can to get Americans out into safety. So our diplomats, the State Department, would be engaged on securing their release with every resource we have. And as you point out, Dan, it would also take resources from trying to help both in Ukraine on a political, on a military level, as well as just, helping other American citizens who are in need around the world.
So why do you think the State Department is making it so clear that they don't want people to go do this?
Well, first and foremost, we don't have an embassy any longer in Ukraine. So there is no direct U.S. support. We cannot help. I mean, I remember when working in war zones saying very clearly to American citizens, we are not going to be able to come and rescue you. And that was when we had an embassy. But I think, you mentioned the media. I would also cite some of the movies that create this false impression that when I get in trouble overseas, the Marines are going to helicopter in and save me. It's just not the case. And you put other people's lives in danger when and where we do try to do that. I mean, I remember doing an extraction of an American citizen. We had to go in with armored vehicles through mobs of people. It was a very dangerous situation and one that could have cost more lives.
And that's not going to happen here. I mean, if an American is captured, I've got to believe that the U.S. is not going to be using helicopters to go into Ukraine to rescue the person, right?
It is very unlikely. Nonetheless, look, I mean, we can cite examples of Americans and even humanitarian workers going into Syria. And there are cases where the U.S., for a number of compelling reasons, will try to, and certainly the family, the friends of those who have been abducted are going to press for every possible resource to be, leveraged in the circumstances. But it's very difficult.
Yeah, and I want to just reiterate the point I'm trying to make here, which is context, that I think it's very important that we not just show how determined and brave a lot of these people are, but it's super important to show how risky this is as well. There's a reason that they're being told not to do it. And there are real dangers both to them and the country, and they all have to be put into context when evaluating this. Brett Bruen, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.